systematically and getting a response for every single question, right? If the questions are too complex, it might result in inaccurate data because they may not understand it, so we try to avoid that situation with the questionnaire, question wording. The self-administered questionnaires are primarily done in the restaurants and the lodges inside. Not everybody goes into a restaurant or a lodge, so if you only did surveys inside, you're missing a whole segment of the population that never goes in a lodge or a restaurant, and it's primarily locals and day skiers. They're more apt not to go inside. It's just a fact. And then the tablet surveys, we don't recommend that you give those to the guests to take the survey because they may not be familiar with the technology or the actual survey program. Once you guys get familiar with it, you're able to rip through it pretty quickly, question by question, and it's a much faster process. Tends to slow it down if you hand it to somebody to take the survey. You can do that, but it will slow things down. Sometimes these will sprout legs and walk away too if you hand it to somebody to take the survey, so you got to be careful of that occasionally, okay? So the methodology for this year, again, we've talked about, we have both paper and tablet surveys. There's two versions of the paper survey, an A and a B form. We've shortened it up again this year. We made a round of edits last season and shortened it quite a bit from what it had been historically, as you probably know, John. And we shortened it even more this year, so it should be pretty manageable. 90% of the questions are the same on the A and the B form. There's a handful, 3 or 4 questions that are unique on each survey. And we do that just so that, again, we keep the total length of any given interview short, but we have more questions in total, so we're able to cover a much larger breadth of issues for the whole study combined, if that makes sense. Let's see here. Just a note on the paper surveys, and you guys do mostly tablet surveys?
We're going to try and do all.
If not all, but I'll just mention this, if you do paper surveys, we did ship you some if you need them or want to use them. With the A and the B, we had a situation we had last year, which we hadn't anticipated, but the B's were in the bottom of the box and the A's were in the top. And a couple resorts, they just took off the top of the stack, until we realized a month into it, hey, we're only getting A forms from this resort. What's going on? And they didn't realize there was B forms in the bottom. So if you do that, try to do an equal number each week. The tablet survey, you only see one survey as an option, and the tablet and the A and B is automatically built in, and it just automatically rotates, so it's seamless. Those unique questions rotated in and out. You won't know the difference, but there's 2 surveys in there. The online version is the same way, and we're trying to cast a wider net with the online version this year. Last year we printed little business cards that had the URL of the survey on there. We also had a QR code that people could scan and take them to the survey. We're also going to try this year, we're going to be able to respond to text, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to get the survey sent to their phone, just to try to broaden that capture of guests. The cards, or the online version, it's just again, it's kind of icing on the cake. We're just trying to broaden the reach, the data that we're collecting with guests that are at the resort, on top of the intercept surveys that we're conducting.
Now again, those are self-selected.
They are, and that's why we're, it's just it's just like the kiosk survey. It's just another way to try to gather more information to have available for analysis.
Do you weigh that information?
Pardon me?
Information that you've collected in one manner versus another, do you weigh it in your final analysis?
We do. We keep it separate unless they're identical, then we would include it. We also reweight the data, the final data that we have by resorts. So there are 14 Utah resorts that we're collecting data from. Even though you guys do many more surveys than anybody else, we'll reweight the final data set so that it's generally proportional to skier visits for each resort in the state. So then looking at the state as a whole, it should be reflective of kind of what the picture is naturally, if that makes sense. So no, just know that the online version's there, is available. You could hand out a card to somebody that refuses to take the intercept survey and see if you wouldn't mind. It also has an explanation of the incentive. There's Ski Utah offers a Rosanna ski or snowboard package, for participation in the survey. And if somebody refuses, you could ask if they wouldn't mind taking it. They could take it later that day. They can take it on their phone. They could take it when they go home. Just another way of capturing information that way. Okay. Types of questions asked. Again, we've talked a lot about this already, but demographics, visitor origins, skiographics, equipment type, what's their ability level, days skied, where are they skiing in their circuit on the trip, different resorts, and how many days, trip characteristics, overnight versus day visits, type and location of lodging, how they book the reservations. The whole Airbnb issue is a hot topic right now that everyone's interested in, particularly the destinations, and how do you regulate that and collect taxes, and how does that fit into the overall lodging picture mix in terms of a destination experience. So we're tracking that as well. The spend data we talked about, tickets and passes used, transportation issues is a big hot topic as well. And then there's the somewhat unique questions on the NSA demographic survey that we may or may not roll some of those in to this survey for you guys. Sampling methodology and reducing bias. So what is sampling? So essentially it's selecting a portion of the total population to take a survey, because we don't have time to talk to everybody that comes to the resort. And in theory, statistical probability with a random selection, if you select a smaller proportion of the sample, it should be representative and reflective of the larger population at large. Okay, that makes sense. Downside is it introduces potential bias into the process if we're not following a regimen or a regulated sample selection process systematically. Okay. However, we take great steps and pains to minimize any potential bias that can creep into the program.
Just a quick question on
You
that.
bet. Yep.
If my bias is different than Gary's bias,
Yeah.
doesn't that produce a greater sample anyway?
A greater, what do you mean?
Variety.
Yeah, a different.
It does, yeah. And hopefully at the end of the day, it all washes out. Everybody's different, exactly.
Just curious.
And that's why we try to emphasize that you should be, and we'll get into some of that, but you should be objective and, not interject your own values and perspective into
Sure.
the survey when you're doing the survey.
Adam, do you think we're really that much different?
We're so similar.
I
Gary.
think so too. Yeah.
Get out of here.
I have a question on a sample. So what's like a sample size is enough to make it significant, representative? I mean, what kind of, it's like you have a sample size of 100. That's not necessarily going to be a large enough sample size to make it.
Not really, no.
What do you look at in terms of a good?
And again, a lot of it depends on what you're trying to do, the level of precision you need the data to be at. How important are those decisions that you're making? Are you making multi-million-dollar, capital improvement decisions for the resort? Then you probably want to have a pretty large sample size that you're comfortable with the results. On any survey, really minimum statistically is about 300 surveys to make a confident projection or conclusions from the results. Most resorts do you guys do at least 2,000 or more surveys, at least of the NSA demographic. This survey, and we'll get into some of that a little bit later, we do for Ski Utah, we target 6,000 surveys for the state as a whole. And then it also depends on how much segmentation of the data. Once you start drilling down or splicing the data, Slicing and dicing it, you might start looking at Utah versus destination visits. You might want to look at single states. California is the top out-of-state destination. For Utah, you might want to look at first-time visitors. How are they different from repeat visitors? How are families different from singles and couples and empty nesters within each of those markets? So you need a bigger sample in order to be able to drill down to those smaller niche markets that you're trying to target and understand better. Okay. So, back to the sampling. These are just kind of some ridiculous examples to get the point across on how sampling works. For example, a blood test. You know, you don't have to take all your blood out to tell what's in it. You just need a few drops or a sample. Same with skiers and riders at your resort. You don't have to talk to everybody to know who's there. If you have a properly selected sample, it should be representative and tell you who's there on any given day throughout the course of the season. Exit polls and phone polls, in theory, if properly conducted, you could predict elections, before they happen. Who's gonna win? Obviously, this went awry this last election cycle last year.
Is Moore gonna win tonight? No more, huh?
I don't know. So all the polls blew up, last year for a variety of reasons. But that's a discussion for another day. A pot of soup, for example, if you have a big pot of soup, you don't need to eat the whole pot to tell what's in it, right? If you stir the pot and take a spoonful out, you should know exactly what's in there. So same thing applies with interviewing people at your resort. If you stir the pot of skiers and snowboarders by making sure you're allocating your surveys by the appropriate locations throughout the resort, by time of day, day of week, you should have an accurate representation of who's there on any given day throughout the course of the season. It should be representative. There's a little soup guy. So